I'll now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish to thank the Assistant Secretary General, Khalid Khiari, and the ASG, Madam Mueller, for the briefing. We thank the Director of the UN Mine Action Service, Agnes Marcayu, for the briefing about the work underway in Syria on this question. On 22 October, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Turkey on the situation in northeast Syria. The content of this MOU is well known with Turkish colleagues. We've already circulated this. However, nonetheless, we wish to highlight key provisions, the purpose of which is to stabilize the situation. When it was arrived at, we proceeded from the premise that protection of peace and tranquility. To achieve this, the Syrian and Turks need to do this together and in a manner that accounts for the interests of one another. We would note that our Iranian partners welcomed this agreement, including Syrian partners. They too welcomed it. As we have repeatedly stated, we understand the aspirations of Turkey to adopt measures, the aim of which is to uphold its own national security. At the same time, it is important to understand that problems plaguing northeastern Syria did not emerge yesterday nor today. The root cause for destabilization in the area beyond the Euphrates is the illegitimate occupation, the illegal occupation of this area, and the perilous demographic engineering experiment that was set out there in an attempt to pit the Kurdish against the Arab population. The Russo-Turkish memorandum is of key significance for stabilization in Syria. This, including in the humanitarian sphere, which we are discussing today. This memorandum explicitly sets out respect for Syrian sovereignty, territorial integrity, the rejection of any separatist tendencies on its soil. Agreements were arrived at to halt the active military stage of the Turkish operation and to deploy Syrian border personnel on the border with Turkey. We have long stressed the following, that addressing the issue of Kurdish aspirations, the Kurds who are an integral part of the multi-ethnic Syrian society, that it is impossible to address this issue absent restoration of Syrian government control throughout the national territory and border. We stand ready to continue to assist Syrian authorities and the Kurds as they seek to build comprehensive dialogue on pressing issues. At the same time, we, pursuant to the memorandum, as well as in agreement with Damascus, will facilitate implementation of the Adan Agreement under current circumstances to ensure that there be the concerns of both sides, Turkey and Syria, on border security, that these concerns be addressed. The Russian military police has already arrived in Syria on the border with Turkey. Following the departure of Kurdish self-defense groups from the area pursuant to the schedule established, we begin jointly with Turkish units. We begin to patrol the 10-kilometer zone. We are of the view that eventually Syria needs to be freed from the illegitimate foreign military presence. I reiterate the following: achievement of a robust and long-term stabilization and a resolution to humanitarian problems in Syria is only possible provided there be respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of that country. We concur with the concerns that have been voiced vis-a-vis the uptick in terrorist threats. And another important provision of the memorandum is a continuation in counterterrorism operations and to ensure that the current situation not be capitalized upon by terrorists, both by stepping up their crimes and facilitating the flight of those held in prisons in northeast Syria. We urge those who have maintained and created those prisons not to shift blame for the fact that jihadists of all stripes spilling over throughout the whole region. At the same time, we caution against separating terrorists into good and bad ones, regardless of what these groups may be called: ISIL, Jabhat al-Nusra, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and so on. They all preach the ideology of terror, murder, and violence. Once again, we caution against playing into the hands of any jihadists for the advancement of parochial agendas to provide them with political cover, financial and material support, or, and this being worse, portraying them as moderate radicals. Such attempts are seen, for example, in Idlib, and we will stamp them out. Turning with respect to the above-mentioned Idlib de-escalation zone, we would note that the situation there remains restive. On 31 August, the ceasefire was introduced. On the whole, this is being upheld. However, the fighters continue to frequently violate it, and they are shelling at positions of Syrian government troops. Civilians and civilian infrastructure are being targeted. Syrian military personnel are dying. There is growing civilian grievances are mounting. They are protesting against the violence of fighters. Again, they are protesting against the forced mobilization, worsened humanitarian situation, and the blocking under threat of shelling, the blocking of exits from the de-escalation zones. Extremists are violently dispersing peaceful demonstrations, and they're opening fire on the protesters. Clearly, the situation within Idlib will only worsen, continue to deteriorate so long as terrorists retain control of the de-escalation zone. As guarantor countries for the Astana process, the Russian Federation and Turkey reaffirmed the intent to continue to, alongside Iran, to seek to arrive at a political settlement to the Syrian conflict. We shall support the operations of the Constitutional Committee, the establishment of which has been worked on laboriously by the members of Astana of late. Our view is that the situation on the ground should not prevent the long-awaited launch of the committee with assistance from the United Nations next week. And the Russian-Turkish memorandum also sets out the need to address the issue of refugees. The Russian Federation, together with the government of the Syrian Arab Republic, is adopting measures to create for the return of refugees, is creating conditions for the return of refugees and internally displaced persons. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians have already returned to their homes. We urge international organizations, including the OHCHR and other bodies, to step up efforts to provide accommodation for return of refugees. Unfortunately, this activity is frequently being delayed in an artificial manner. Mr. President, with the assistance of the Russian Center for the Reconciliation of Opposing Sides and the Syrian government, together with the United Nations and the International Red Cross Committee, efforts are continuing to provide accommodation, to resettle individuals from Rukban camp. We trust that the issue of refugees and IDPs there will be addressed expeditiously. Turning to the Al-Hul camp, there the situation is genuinely catastrophic in connection with the limited access for humanitarian agencies and a lack of financing. This has all deteriorated due to the fact that a growing number of refugees have entered that area from other camps in the northeast. Half of them are women and children. It is known that there are jihadists there, and jihadist ideology is being disseminated in the area. It is past time to consider transferring all illegally held territories to the Syrian authorities, and this will help to facilitate a resolution to the issue of refugees. As was noted by Madam Marcayo, what remains pressing is the issue of mine clearance. We welcome the beginning of efforts by the United Nations Service in Syria. The Russian Federation is engaged in efforts to clear mines in Syria, both nationally and through contributions to the service. In this connection, we urge all countries who genuinely are concerned about the humanitarian situation in Syria to join these efforts, to join efforts on other humanitarian fronts, and to deliver humanitarian assistance to all Syrians with neither discrimination nor discrimination nor preliminary conditions. This includes not merely post-conflict recovery projects for the country, but also, and this is of importance, this includes the lifting of unilateral sanctions for the normalization of ordinary civilians' lives. Thank you.
Thank the Minister of the Russian Federation for his statement.